You start with your network, absolutely. But when you apply to jobs, the thing that ends up happening is you get frustrated by not getting results. And so instead of focusing in on what you really want to do, you start applying to everything you could find. And that ends up taking an enormous amount of time. I do have some good news on that front. Recruiting technology is evolving. You're going to see video interviews becoming much more common in the recruiting world. You're going to see chatbots begin to engage with people, with job seekers, specifically from the corporate side to deal with this issue. We know on our side of the business that we've had too much volume to deal with. So on the plus side, there is some technology that's going to be coming around to help us to mitigate that. But I think the thing to do is, if you want to avoid that, when you do some homework. When you send your application into a job, look on LinkedIn, see if you could find who posted it. Find either, I think the most obvious person to find would be a recruiter at that company, and just say to them, like, hey, I applied for this position on your company website. I'm really interested in your company because XYZ. And I just wanted to make sure my profile gets reviewed. I get those types of emails fairly regularly, not all the time, but I probably get 2 or 3 a week from people who applied for other jobs at the company I work for, that really haven't heard anything. And they just say, hey, here's my resume. I applied for this position. I'm interested in this company because I know what you guys do. And I think it's, and I always take that and I forward that over to the recruiter responsible and say, hey, this person looks like they took the extra effort to find out, who one of us was, and to reach out and say, I'm genuinely interested. That's a tactic that can work. You do need to follow up. It's a two-way street. Recruiters, on the flip side, when we reach out to people, we usually reach out to them once, and if they don't respond, we never follow up with them. And that's a bad habit for recruiters. Recruiters should be good at following up. And it's the same for your job search. You have to understand that you're trying to sell yourself. And if you have been in sales, you know that only 4% of sales are made on the first approach. So it really shouldn't be that shocking. That maybe, you have to apply to so many places if that's what you're doing, because you're only going to convert about 4 or 5% of those, statistically speaking, when you're selling anything. And when you're looking for a job, you're selling your services, what your capabilities and abilities are, knowledge, skills, and abilities are. So if you're only approaching somebody once, or you're only just raising your hand and you're not getting a lot of response from that, it may not be for any other reason than, it's the first contact. You only had a 4% chance to start with. Make second contact. I call it being professionally persistent. Don't do it every day, but it's fair to check in like a week later and say, okay, I'm still interested. This is 1 or 2 things I may not have mentioned before. The other thing I think you could do when you're doing your job search is, after you get the interview, something that comes across very well that's a little bit old school, that isn't done as much anymore, is writing a thank you note to the people who interviewed you. It's not nearly as common as it used to be, so it can make you stand apart. And what you want to do is thank them for their time, express your interest, and use that opportunity to remind them about something you talked about. You guys talked about doing XYZ. My experience at this company doing XYZ was very similar, and I think I could be a great contribution to, contributor to your team. Something along those lines will also really help you tilt the scales in your favor. It can help. It's not going to turn a no into a yes, but if somebody on the recruiting side, what we hear that's frustrating for us is our hiring managers will interview 3 people and they will tell us, well, I really liked them, but I'd like to see a few more. And that on our side is very frustrating. And on your side, it's very frustrating too. And what happens is you've unknowingly been on the other side of one of those 3 interviews and you thought it's gone really well, but they were they were impressed, but they were on the fence and they didn't see it or something different or inspiring. And so what that person is looking for at that moment is they're looking for something a little different, something to stand out and make you seem like you're different from the other people who have similar backgrounds that they've just spoken to. And one professionally appropriate way to do that is to follow up and thank them and remind them. And I've seen that push managers off the fence of a maybe and turn the maybe into a yes.